Hello everyone, Kim Victoria here. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you for joining me. I hope you have seen the previous two videos in this series, and if not, I'm certainly going to be linking them in the description box. I have a new playlist that I'm calling Quick Art Tips, and that's hashtag Quick Art Tips. What I'm focusing on at the moment is doing DIY, make your own stencils and masks. Because one of the things that I wanted to do for myself was come up with some easy stencils for creating borders on the edges of journal pages. And in the previous two videos, I showed you how I made these borders. And I know that with these stencils that I've created, I could do a lot more. I've already got some ideas. And when you see these particular videos, I'm sure you're going to get lots and lots of ideas as well. So I've been playing around now with hearts and heart stencils. Now, most of us have heart rubber stamps, maybe in different sizes. I know I've got a couple. I didn't pull them out because I'm focusing on making stencils for pages. So I have a few things here. I'm going to do paint today. I'm going to show you with paint. On the previous two videos, I'm trying to keep these quick art tip videos down to a half an hour or less. They need to be quick, right? So that you can dive in and do your own thing. And, take these ideas and run with them. I have kind of a nice list going. Anyway, so let me get started here with one of the first ideas. One of the things I wanted was a stencil for doing page edges that I could use like these other ones that I've been making with the circles and the zigzag design. So I do have a heart punch, and you could use a rubber stamp and to punch to impress your paper and cut around it to create an opening. So I haven't done that because I do have a punch. But if you don't have a punch and you have a rubber stamp, you could kind of do the same thing, but it would just be more tedious cutting the shape out by hand. Anyway, so I have this punch and I wanted to have these hearts evenly spaced. I drew these inside with a pen. And of course, that's one of the things that it can be used for. I'm going to do some painting with this also. So anyway, the first thing I needed to figure out is I wanted to know how big this heart is. And it's a little less than an inch. And I wanted some space in between. So I measured 1.125 apart and just put a little line there. So each of those little lines is 1 1/8 inch apart. Okay, so I'll go ahead and do that. Now also there's a height here, so that it is helpful to know how high your lines need to be. This is something I've been discovering with all of these stencil things. So if I make a little mark right there on the paper, that can be a good starting point. We can see with this one that, yeah, that's going to work just fine, and I'll have room for all these hearts. So I've been doing a lot of experimenting to figure these things out. Okay, so I want to go 1 1/8 inch apart. Okay, so that gives me that line up. Now the reason I have this is an old mouse pad. It gives me some traction because I don't like to punch down from this direction. I like to see where my punch is going. I have a piece of wood here that creates a nice solid something that I can push down on. That has been so helpful. So I line up, I can see the pencil mark. You might not be able to see it, but there's that pencil mark, that first one. So I slide it over so that it's all the way over at the edge of that punch. And then I slide this over And now I can push down. And what this pad does, this old mouse pad does, is it creates some traction. What I have found is this slides around a little bit too easily on the table, and well, I've had it fly away on me on a couple of these experiments. So again, I'm looking for that mark, and I'm pressing the paper into the punch. I want to make sure I can see just the edge of that mark. Slide this over. And I find this so much easier to do standing up. You probably have found the same. So I'll just go ahead and line that up. I'm pushing the paper into the punch and holding it here, sliding the wood on. And once I've started pressing down, it's the punch itself that's holding the paper in place. So let me just go ahead and do this really quick. Okay, so I have all my hearts. And so there's a couple different ways of doing this. Now, this is just fine the way it is, but this distance might be a little further away from the page edge than you want. So you can see this is closer than this. So if I want to keep it really close, all I have to do is just trim it off so it's not so far away from the page edge. So that's much better. If, say, now on this one, I cut it off this way. So say you want your hearts to be faced in this direction instead. So now I have them going in both directions, so whichever one I want to use, whether it's this direction or that direction on the page, I can have it. Even not having two of them is kind of nice because I can border the whole page on both sides that way, or you could use them, you know, on what cards or whatever you're making. Okay, so we have that. Now this is the part that I feel is super, super important, and that is to coat the paper with Mod Podge. So I just use Mod Podge, and I always keep some water. I have a brush that's I just use for glue and this kind of thing, and I always get the brush wet first, and this is an important tip, is if whatever your brush you're using, this is just my raggy kind of glue up brush, and when you get it wet first, the bristles of brushes suck the paint in. So if you keep it wet first, you won't have as much trouble getting the paint out from close to the ferrule. This is called a ferrule. So I try to remind people of that it's really important to have water and to wet the bristles first. It makes a huge difference with acrylic paints. You don't need to do that with watercolor paint because that just washes out with water anyway, but it is important to do it. And I just put an extra piece of plastic there to seal it well so it doesn't dry out. So what I do with the Mod Podge, and that makes these stencils that you're making last a whole lot longer. So the important thing is to go in all the different directions, because you want to get the Mod Podge on all the edges of the cut edges, not just on the cardstock surface, but also on all of the edges. It's going to give your personally made stencil it's going to last longer. So now I coat the whole thing, but I wait because I want to have something to hang on to. So I have that first one done. I'm just going to set that aside. And now while that's drying, I can go ahead and make another stencil. So this one, I also felt it would be nice to have stacked hearts. So for this one, I did the same thing except I spaced them much farther apart. Okay, so that then I could just cut them and stack them, and I taped them together with masking tape. So you don't need a demonstration on that. That's really, really simple. So basically I would like to do these two hearts, and I would cut in the middle, and I would just stack them up. So that way I would have more hearts. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Oh, and then you wind up with some confetti. I've got quite a nice little bag of confetti, but these also, they could be embellishments. So this is a quick art tip all by itself. If you have any of these kinds of punches, this one's kind of neat because it has the little arms fold out, so it makes it much easier to store. So I made this stencil with this punch. What I have found with a lot of these punches, whether it's this type or this type, especially if they have a lot of detail in them, is that eventually when they start to get dull, they don't work so well. And they're a bit finicky, some of them. Sometimes, the paper has to be just the right weight or they just don't work. What I've been using for all of my stencils that I've been making is a lightweight cardstock. It's not super thick. It's more of a lightweight. This particular cardstock is suitable to go through the printer, so it has to be flexible enough to do that. It also works great with these punches. So with any of this kind of punch, doesn't matter which you have, one of the ways you can prolong the life of the punch is by turning it into a stencil. I did this design by making this stencil, and you could do that with all of these punches. Make them into a stencil as well as having it as a punch. And sometimes maybe you don't want to have this delicate a border on the edge of a page. Maybe it needs to be, maybe it needs to be just a regular page in a journal that you're worried about it getting damaged if it's all this delicate detail. So that's another way that having a stencil is so nice. And I just punched it the way you would normally punch it. I did the Mod Podge on it. And that's really all there is to it. It is so easy. So let me get a piece of scratch paper here. Now I haven't done this with paint yet, but one of the other things that I discovered by doing this stuff is that not only do I get this really pretty edge, but I also get this ribbon-like border on the edge of the page. So I'm just got a couple of different inks here. This really nice dark ink that here and here I was using. This is a permanent dye. This particular one is a water-based dye pad. So I'm just making sure it's lined up well. I'm using this really small brush. I have also found, well actually let me go ahead and give that a try. This is just one of those little foam daubers. I hadn't tried it with this stencil yet. Well, that works. Okay. So if you don't have any of these little brushes, a foam dauber will work. Oh, that looks nice. Foam dauber works great. So that's with the little brush, and that's with the foam dauber. I like how we get this ribbon-like edge as well. I think that came out really pretty. So this is going to be a page in a journal. Okay, one of the things that I really wanted to do in one of these videos is use acrylic paint, because that's another option that we have, of course. So I have the stacked hearts on a book page. This is a stencil brush. I have used a cosmetic sponge successfully every single time. So we'll do both. We'll do both. But I hadn't used a stencil brush yet. I just did an experiment to make sure that it was going to work. And with stencils, it's always a good idea to pounce. Just an up and down movement, whether it's with a sponge or a stencil brush, so that you don't, if you rotate, you could lift edges or the bristles could push underneath the stencil and you get a blurry image. So let's see how this goes. So just going up and down, up and down, up and down, and you need very, very little on your brush. Very little. It's kind of hard to see. I know it's kind of hard for you to see what's going on. Let's see. Let me do it at an angle. There, just sort of pouncing up and down. Very little paint. Okay, let's reveal. Not bad, not bad. I used a little bit too much paint, but that gives it a more rustic look, right? So now that I have that, one of the things you want to do, you can't submerge your paper stencils in water the way you can with a plastic stencil. So you want to have a rag handy and just gently pick up some of that paint. Just have a soft rag. I like to cut up old t-shirts that have seen better days, and I use them as rags. They're fantastic rags for cleaning rubber stamps, stencils. They're just, yeah, t-shirt material is great. So if I do this with the sponge, let's see if that works a little better. I mean, this is all experimental. So I'm getting the sponge just a little bit damp. Same thing as I am doing with my brush, is just having a little bit of dampness in the sponge. Very little paint on there. I don't know, I'm just tapping, I'm just dragging some in and tapping off most of it. By the way, this is a cottage cheese lid. It's great for acrylic paint because after it's dried, it peels off after you've got a few layers. Okay, so let's try the sponge instead. Gotta hold it down. Well, it's very similar. I think the sponge gave us a cleaner edge. I also had a little more control, it would seem, because I've got the stencil brush came off the sides a bit. So that is because I didn't make this really wide. And that was why I was saying when you go to make your own and you want to have this kind of a stacked look, make sure you give yourself lots of room on each side of the punch. And then when you stack them, you'll have more width on both sides to protect your paper underneath. And that's what's meant by a mask. A mask and a stencil. A stencil creates openings of a pattern so that you get the pattern, but it also is masking the paper underneath, or the window, or whatever the craft is, or yeah. Mask used to just mean like a face mask, and then photography picked it up because when you mask something, you're just blocking some part of the surface underneath so that it doesn't get any paint or ink or whichever you're using. So I looked that up for fun because I was going, what's the difference between a mask and a stencil? Not much, really. And also, this could be considered a type of template because I get to use it over and over and over again. Now on a big design like this, it has a very simple opening. Getting a little buildup of acrylic paint is not going to affect its efficiency and how it works. Ink is gentler on this kind of a personally made, homemade stencil because it doesn't have bulk, whereas acrylic paint has some bulk. So anyway, I just really wanted to have some simple stencils that I could keep in my little stencil drawer over here that I could just pull out and make some nice borders on pages without having to sew on some lace or ribbon or something like that, or, little pieces of paper, whatever it is. I don't have to glue anything. I don't have to sew anything. I can just create some very pretty borders with a simple stencil and some of my ink. Super fast, super easy, and it's great. I'm really, really liking that. And so now I've started a plastic bag with stencils. So one of the things you might want to consider if you decide you want to do this is color code. I didn't do that at first, so I was doing my zigzag design. I just got out some red cardstock and did the red design, and then I started doing the circle designs, and I realized I should use different colors. Like maybe the circle designs could be blue and so I might make some more. But right now I have these. Now I can add hearts to this. They don't take up hardly any space. Stencils can be quite large. They're small ones, but I don't I don't even know if there's actual border things like this, but I can customize these so much to my own uses, my own needs. So really this whole thing with these quick art tips is I just want to show you a few little fun things for you to try. And of course, if you have some different punches, and I've got a few, I'm going to go ahead and make some stencils with my punches. And I have another couple of things for stencils that I want to share with you, but I'm trying to keep these videos below 30 minutes, and this gives you quite a bit to play with. Let me put this away. I'm going to go ahead and use up this paint on some book pages, and I'll be right back. So what we have is whatever kind of edge punch you have, you can turn it into a stencil. And it will actually prolong the life of it because you won't have to use it as much. You can use it as a stencil and not wear out those blades as quickly as they sometimes do. Then, of course, we've got the row of hearts, which you can do directly with a heart punch. And I just drew in those with a watercolor marker. And then I went ahead and I did this one. So I just used a regular gel pen, and so you can kind of see, it's like, golly, you've got the idea. And then I did these hearts with this particular one with the acrylic paint, and I had quite a bit of paint left there, so I just went ahead and made some collage fodder. Just swiping the sponge and then daubing it in different angles. Create some fun collage fodder there. So this is what I have for you today, and I hope that this is an idea that is fun and useful for you. I would love to hear your comments about this. Let me know. And I've got a couple more ideas on making your own stencils. I'd love to hear yours. So, did you find this useful? Please let me know. All right. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye-bye.